Yes, madam, sir, I've been expecting you. I heard that you want to know all about the FSA during the 1933s. They were often referred to as the Truth in Securities Law. They required that investors receive financial and other significant information concerning securities being offered for public sale. They also prohibited the site misrepresentations and other fraud in sales of securities. Excuse me, sir, but I don't want to mess up what you're telling me, but what does the FSA mean to you? The FSA means to me is that if you purchase securities and suffer losses, you have important recovery rights that the SEC requires for accurate information. And I believe that it's some act that helps you in some various ways with your recovery rights. And class, what do you have for questions? What do you have for questions? Pause the video if any of you have questions about what is next and what I've already said. With the requirements information for the FSA during the 1933s, the purpose of registration is that their primary means of accomplishing their goals is that disclosure of important financial information through the registration of securities. All about that information enables investors, not the government, to make informed judgments about whether they should purchase a company's securities. While the SEC requires that the information provided to be accurate, it does not guarantee the accurateness for the purchase of a company's securities. Investors who purchase securities and suffer losses about their important recoveries rights, if they can prove that there was incomplete or inaccurate disclosure of important information, the FSA might help them out with all the things that they need about their recovery rights. Some even more information about the FSA is the registration process. In general, the registration process is securities sold in the U.S. must be registered. The registration forms companies file provide essential facts while minimizing the burden and expense of complying with the law. In general, registration forms call for some examples like a description of the company's properties and business, a description of the securities to be offered for sale, also information about the management of the company and financial statements certified by independent accounts. The next information I'm going to talk about is in a summary of the FSA and what I have not said and what I have said in a summary. The first thing I'm going to start by saying is the Securities Act of 1933 was the first federal law in the United States to regulate the sale of company shares, bonds, and other investment interests. To prevent stock fraud, explosion of investors, Congress did not attempt to make sure that investments would grow. Instead, the law focused on accurate disclosure of relevant information. Next, I'm going to talk about blue sky laws to federal regulations still following the FSA. The Securities Act of 1933 was a response to the stock market crash of 1929, which had precipitated the Great Depression. Corporate securities were regulated solely by the states through blue sky laws, which the that's what they were known for. Stock sellers offering shares not in a solid company but in the empty blue sky, the first federal law securities of this. The sunlight of transparency. This is what is still following the FSA. The new federal legislation did not use exactly the regulatory strategy as early as state laws. Traditional blue sky legislation generally sought to promote honest disclosure of relevant facts as well as to make sure that the investment opportunity was sound. The law does not require proof that the investment is good. Its exclusive concern is whether facts pertinent to accessing the security's value are completely and accurately disclosed to potential investors. The Securities and Exchange Commission, still following the FSA, the Securities Act of 1933, created the Securities and Exchange Commission, or the SEC, which is the federal government agency charged with overseeing securities transactions. The law states that the SEC has the authority to issue regulations, establish filing procedures, set official accounting standards, conduct investigations, and cooperate with state securities regulatories. Registration and sale of securities, still following FSA. The Securities Act of 1933 sets forth requirements for the issuance and initial sales of securities. Unless a specific exception applies, securities cannot be distributed through the mail, stock exchanges, or any other form of interstate commerce without filing a registration statement with the SEC. Next, the subsequent development, still following the FSA. 1 year later, Congress enacted the Securities Act of 1934, which regulates trading exchanges and other stock secondary markets. More recently, in 2012, Congress passed the Jobs Act, which among other things made it legal for companies to raise funds by selling stock on online crowdfunding sites. Thank you for listening. Come back if you have any more questions. See ya, and have a good day.